What are we going to do? Asked Janet, wiping her eyes. Peter considered. We will have to give it up, he said. We can't very well go against what Daddy says, and we know we can't do anything ourselves because we don't understand what any one of the things Jeff remembered can possibly mean. And now Jeff is gone, and we don't know where. We can't even get him to tell his tale to anyone. We will have to call a meeting and tell the others, said Janet gloomily. They won't like it. It sounded so exciting at first, now it's just a silly makeup, and I liked Jeff too. So did I, said Peter. Let's write notes and slip them into the letterboxes to tell the others there will be a meeting tomorrow down in the shed, I think, for a change. The notes were written and delivered. At 10 o'clock the next morning, the seven collected together in the shed. The password adventure seemed most disappointing to Janet and Peter now that there was no adventure. I have got gloomy news, said Peter. We told Daddy everything and he didn't believe it. He told us to fetch Jeff and promised to listen to his story, but Jeff was gone. Everyone was startled. Gone? Said Jack. Where? Peter produced a note and everyone read it solemnly. We have got the kitten, said Peter, and that's all that's left of Jeff and his peculiar tale. So we can't go on with anything, said George in dismay. I was just getting all worked up about it, thinking we were in for another excitement. I know, but we were wrong, Peter said. This affair is closed. We can't go any further or find out anything more. It's our first failure. It was a very gloomy meeting indeed. Everyone felt every flat. They wondered where Jeff was. Had he really cheated them and told them a made-up tale? It was very difficult to believe. We saw Mr. Teaser and Jeff's uncle, said Colin suddenly. They couldn't have been made up. We have only got Jeff's word for it that they were his uncle and Mr. Teaser, Peter reminded him. He certainly said they were, but for all we know, they might have been 2 4-stars or even poachers. They looked pretty nasty anyway. All right, said George. It's finished. We don't do anything more. Are we going to the tree house today? I don't feel like it somehow this morning, said Janet. Does anyone? I feel disappointed and rather cross. Everyone laughed. Janet was hardly ever cross. Colin patted her on the back. Cheer up. We will soon get over it. And anyway, finished or not, I'm still going to keep my eyes open. Who knows? I might meet Emma Lynn walking down the street carrying a red pillow embroidered with the letters MKX. That made everyone roar with laughter. They said goodbye and went off feeling more cheerful. What's the date? Said George to Colin as they went down the lane together. Wednesday the 24th, isn't it? Well, it's tomorrow that things were supposed to happen according to Jeff. He probably made up the date, said Colin. What are we going to do this morning? We have plenty of time left. Let's go down to the canal, said George. We may see some barges going along. I like the canal. It's so long and straight and quiet. I like it too, said Colin. I will go and get my boat. You get yours too. Meet me in that road that goes under the railway bridge down by the canal. What road? Asked George, but Colin had already gone. George raised his voice. Colin, what would you mean? I don't want to miss you. You know the road, idiot, yelled back Colin. It's Amber Lane. Colin was so far away by this time that it was difficult to catch what he said. It sounded like Emma Lane. George stood rooted to the spot. Amber Lane, Emma Lane. Jeff might have misheard what his uncle had said. It was probably Amber Lane he meant, not Emma Lane. They sounded so much the same. Amber Lane. It might be that, said George to himself in excitement. We will have a really good look around Amber Lane, just in case. With their boats, the two boys met at the beginning of Amber Lane. George began to tell Colin excitedly what he thought. When you called out Amber Lane, it sounded exactly like Emma Lane, he said. Suppose that's what Jeff meant. He might have heard wrong. He was half asleep. Amber Lane, I'm sure that was what it was. And you think something was to happen in Amber Lane on the 25th? Said Colin, looking very thrilled. Gosh, you may be right, but what would happen here? They looked round Amber Lane. Although it was called a lane, it was nothing of that sort, though it might have been years ago. It was a rather wide, dirty street with great warehouses on either side. It lay down to the canal. There were a good many people about taking parcels from the warehouses and running messages. It was difficult to imagine any robbery or anything out of the way taking place here. Colin and George examined the street very carefully. They came to one warehouse that had a grating let into the bottom of the wall. They peered down. People were in an underground room below, busy packing up parcels. The grating gave them a little light and air, though it also let in the dust. Well, there's a grating, said George, standing up after peering through for some time. I suppose someone could stand here and watch through it, as Jeff said, but what would be the point? Someone might watch from the other side of the grating, said Colin. If he stood on the table down there, look, he could peer into the street through the grating. If the place was in darkness, he wouldn't be seen peering out. It would be quite a good place to watch from. It might. Yes, it might. A grating to watch through in Amber Lane. This is rather good. Are we on the track of anything, do you think? George said. Colin said, probably not. If we are, we shall probably spot a red pillow on a sofa somewhere or hear someone hissing, MKX, you are wanted. They went to sell their boats on the canal till dinner time, then they went home, peeping through the grating at the foot of the warehouse in Amber Lane as they went. The underground room below was empty now. The workers had gone to lunch. We would better tell Peter, said Colin as they parted. Let's go along this afternoon and tell him. He ought to know, I think, even though there may be nothing in it. Peter was most interested. That's bright of you, he said. Amber Lane. Anyone could mishear that quite easily, but I don't think so much of the grating. There are gratings everywhere. Not in Amber Lane, said Colin. We looked, and that's only one. Janet and I will go along and have a look at Amber Lane this afternoon, said Peter, and the grating. They went. Amber Lane looked gloomy and dirty. Janet and Peter examined the grating with interest. Colin was right, there was only one in Amber Lane. Well, it doesn't tell us much, said Peter. Even if we decided that this was the grating through which Mr. Teaser or someone was going to watch, why should they want to watch, and what? It's no crime to peer through a grating. They might want to watch unseen for something or someone, so that they could signal his coming to somebody waiting to pronounce, said Janet. Peter stared at her, most impressed. Yes, that's exactly what they might do. But what could they see from there? Let's stand with our backs to the grating and see if we can spot what would be within their sight. They stood and looked hard, their eyes ranging over the warehouse opposite, the pavement, and the lamp post. Well, all that could be seen from behind that grating is the warehouse opposite, though not all of it, said Janet. And the lamp post, and the pavement near it, and the red pillar box. Yes, I'm sure that red pillar box could be seen too. Janet suddenly stopped. She caught her breath and looked round at Peter, her eyes shining. Peter, she said. Peter, the red pillow. The red pillow? Where? Said Peter, puzzled. Oh, Janet, I see what you mean. It wasn't a red pillow that Jeff heard. It was red pillar box, and there it is. The two stared at the red pillar box, thinking hard. A girl went up to it and posted some letters. Peter and Janet felt absolutely certain that red pillow meant red pillar box, and it could be watched from behind the only grating in Amber Lane. We are getting somewhere, said Peter. Suddenly feeling quite out of breath, Jeff did hear something. His tail wasn't made up, but because he was half asleep when he heard the men talking, he didn't hear properly. If only we could find what MKX was, said Janet. But we can't. I expect all the men in Mr. Teaser's gang have numbers or letters, but we are certainly putting a few of the jigsaw pieces together, Peter. Let's go and tell the others. Every member of the Secret Seven felt excited when they heard the latest news. They thought that Janet had been very clever in realizing that red pillow was a mistake for red pillar box. Barbara thought for a moment and then said that she wondered if the man watching behind the grating might be waiting to signal to someone when the postman come to empty the box. Someone might be waiting to steal the letters from him, she said. That's an idea, said Peter, but there isn't much point in stealing ordinary letters. They are not worth anything. That's true, said Jack. It's sacks of registered parcels and letters that are usually stolen. They wrote something, but not ordinary letters. I don't somehow think the watcher is watching the pillar box. He's probably watching for someone waiting there or passing it. Is it worth telling Daddy all this, Janet, do you suppose? Said Peter after the seven had discussed everything thoroughly. After all, it's tomorrow something has been planned to happen. We haven't much time left. Well, we might tell him this evening, said Janet. Let's wait till then. We might think of something else important. I don't think Daddy will change his mind about things just because you have discovered that the red pillar box can be watched through a grating in Amber Lane. It does sound rather silly put like that, said Peter. Well, we will wait till this evening. Goodbye till then. But before they could tell their father of their latest ideas, Pam came dashing into the garden to find Peter and Janet. Barbara was just behind. They found Peter and Janet watering their gardens. Pam flung herself on them. Peter, Janet, what do you think? We have seen MKX. Janet dropped her watering can, startled. Peter stared in excitement. Who is he? Where did you see him? It isn't a he, it's a van, said Barbara. Pam and I were going home together when we saw a post office van standing near a pillar box. You know, a mail van, painted red. And its letters were MKX, cried Pam. MKX 102, what do you think of that? We couldn't believe our eyes when you saw it was MKX. I'm sure that's what Jeff meant, the mail van MKX. But there must be plenty of cars with that letters MKX, said Peter. Plenty. Not in one place, said Pam. I don't ever remember seeing MKX in our town before. I notice car numbers because I want to see if I can spot a Z something someday. I haven't yet, Peter. That van must be the MKX those men spoke about when Jeff was half asleep. Peter sat down on a garden seat. I think you are right, he said. Yes, I think you must be right. It's all beginning to fit in. Wait now, let's work it out.